How well are you able to speak your truth? Do you feel you're able to say what's on your mind, or do you hide what you're thinking from other people? The air element is all about the way that we communicate, but it's also connected to the expansiveness of the mind and the breath. Working with the air element leads us to that infinite part of ourselves. This is where new beginnings and breakthroughs take place. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the air element as well as ways that you can work with it in both your mundane and magical lives. So, merry meet. I'm Aislin. This is Ask Aislin, and I am here tonight sharing ways to work with the air element. So, welcome to those joining us live. If you're here with us live, I see Cindy's in the chat. Hi, everybody. If you're here with us live, you can leave questions and comments. I'll be watching the chat as we go, and I'll be answering questions at the end. I see Kurt's also here. Hi, everybody. So we're just going to go ahead and dive right in and just begin by talking about the basics of the air element, and then I'll share ways that you can work with it in both your mundane and magical lives. So, from a Western metaphysical perspective, the air element is connected to communication, it's connected to the mind and the intellect, connected to the breath, inspiration, like I mentioned in the beginning, new beginnings, breakthroughs, communication, travel, logic, and truth. So, in fact, the highest expression of the air element is the expression of our highest truth. Now, this isn't just an individual truth, but the higher truth that speaks and connects more deeply to our higher self, that infinite part of us that we might call the soul. Air is thought to be a masculine and a projective energy, so it doesn't have anything to do with gender. It's just simply the way that we describe these qualities. And it also has the qualities of hot and warm or moist. So in some ways, you could say that air is like the intersection between water and fire. So like fire, it has that heat, but like water, it has that movement. So and that wetness. So what do we do if we would like to work with the air element? What would we do? Okay, so we're going to talk about some various ways to do it. Some are more on the magical side, some are on the more of the mundane side. And just saying hi to a few more people I see in the chat. Rebecca's here, and Debbie, and Maggie. Welcome, everybody. So again, you can leave questions in the chat for the Q&A later, and you can also leave comments as we go. I'm watching the chat. So, the first way that you could connect to the air element is through working with specific times of the natural cycles that are tied to the air element. So, if we think about the solar cycle, we are actually in the air element part of the solar cycle right now. This usually takes place, shouldn't say usually, it always takes place in spring between Ostara and Beltane, which is right where we are right now as we're filming this. That is the time of the solar year tied to air. Now, you could also work with the timing of the lunar cycle. So, if we were looking to work with the air element during the lunar cycle, the most opportune time would be during the waxing moon. And also, as we're filming this, we are in a waxing moon, a waxing gibbous moon, in fact. And so, this is also a double, we kind of like have double air going on right now. Now, as far as the daily cycle goes, the time of day that's most connected to air is dawn or morning, which makes sense, right? Because air is tied to the new beginnings. And for those of you who cast circles, practice magic with a cast circle and call to quarters, many of you probably place your air element in the east. So again, that's the part of the earth, right, where the sun rises, new beginnings. So all of this makes connections. Now, another timing that you could use to work with the air element is during the signs of Gemini, Libra, or Aquarius. And this could be whether we were when the sun was in these three signs or when the moon was in these three signs. All right, so I think that when we want to work with an element and we really become interested in diving more deeply into it and understanding and experiencing it, we really do benefit from trying to time some of our workings during those times of the cycles that are tied to that element. Now, as I mentioned before, the direction connected to the element of air is the east, the direction of the rising sun. So if you do magical workings and spells, and I'm going to talk in a moment about setting up an altar, so you might put that in the east. But if we do magical workings during these specific times, we're naturally going to bring more of that air element in. Okay, so that is our first idea, working with times of the natural cycles that are connected to the air element. And I'm just saying hi to a few more people. I see Ruth is here too. Hi, Ruth. And Kurt said sylphs. Yes, so we're going to talk a bit about that as well. So the sylphs are the elementals connected to the air element. Okay, so our next idea is to build an altar, an air altar, or put a portion, reserve a portion of your own altar for the air element. Okay, so let's think about what we would do if we wanted to build an air altar. So the first idea would be to face it to the east. So last week I was talking about the fire element, and I was talking about placing the altar in the south. And I don't think I mentioned this, but there was a series of rituals that our coven had done. A lot of times these were at around Imbolc, because it's a really good time to work with balancing the elements. And we actually built elemental altars at each of the quarters. So rather than just have our quarter candles, which is what we usually did, we actually built altars. I got velvet cloth from Joann's, like scrap fabric of each color associated with the element. So we had altar cloths, and then people brought things to place on those altars that were associated with each of the elements. So it's a really fun idea if you want to work with all of the elements. If you want to work just with east or with air, though, put your altar in the east. Now, if that's not possible, that's totally fine. You can have your altar anywhere. So what could we place on it? So the colors associated with the air element are usually yellow from a Western metaphysical perspective, but also light blue. So yellows and light blues will be really good for the air element. Objects that you could add to the altar: incense, sage, or another type of herbal stick. And I was actually going to, am I going to do that now? I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that now. I was going to burn some incense here because not everybody has seen resin incense burned with charcoal. So I'm going to do that here. I know a lot of you probably have, but some of you haven't. So I'm going to demonstrate that here and get us some incense going. But I did want to mention something about sage first. Is it's very important to make sure that it's ethically sourced. If you're going to use it, there are a lot of alternatives to sage. I personally like cedar. It's very good. You can get it in a cedar stick. I just recently got a mugwort stick, which is also really cool, because you can use that to kind of descend into an altered state of consciousness, which can be really good for rituals, magical workings. Rosemary, I had a friend who made a stick out of rosemary. So these are all really great things to burn, and they bring the air element into your space. All right, so before I go on to other things to place on the altar for the air element, let's burn some incense so I can get it going here. So I think I did this maybe like a year ago in an episode, so it's been a long time, and not everybody's seen this done before. So this is a charcoal disc. Many of you have probably seen this, but for those who haven't, and so what we're going to do is we are going to light this on fire. I recommend having like a candle wand, we call these, and I'm going to go ahead and light this. And actually, what I'm going to do, my friend gave me tweezers, because you can, if you get this going too fast, it'll get very hot quickly and burn your hand. So it's really nice if you have the tweezer. So we're just going to light this, and then you're not going to really be able to see this on the camera very well, but it's going to start to, you can see it's starting to smoke. It'll start to spark red. The goal is, if this is a good piece of charcoal, it's going to do this very quickly. Bad pieces that are kind of stale, they're going to start and then they're going to go out. And I'll tell you something about that too, but it depends on where you live, how well this works. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to place it in my cauldron. You want to place it in something that is fireproof. So a lot of people like sandstone dish or soapstone or sandstone dishes, but we're going to do it here. And then I'm using dragon's blood tonight, and so I'm going to take some pieces of this resin. So a lot of people prefer incense sticks or cones. I really love the drama of doing resin. So we're going to put a few pieces of resin right here on the charcoal. And then you're going to get to see this. Should start pretty quick. There we go. Yeah. So very dramatic way to burn incense. One downside of it is that it burns out pretty quickly. The charcoal will stay good for a while, but this incense is going to burn off, and then I would need to continue to replace it. So unlike an incense stick or a cone, which I can just light and let it go, this it needs to be kind of attended. But very dramatic, right? I love it. Burning this way. It has such a nice smell. So this one's dragon's bud. So what I was going to mention about the charcoal is when I lived in Boston, because of the humidity in the area, if you get these charcoal discs and you don't seal these really well after you open them, they will actually go bad. So it's not that there's anything bad that will happen, but they're just going to have a lot of trouble lighting, and they will go out as well. So once you get them lit, they kind of go out. So what I recommend doing, especially if you're in a humid climate, if you're on the East Coast, you want to do this for sure, is wrap it up in foil as soon as you open these. You can get these at metaphysical stores. You can order these on Amazon, self-igniting charcoal discs. And I got these at CVS because I'm lucky enough to have a neighborhood where they sell them just at the CVS. But even here in LA, I still wrap this up, and it's just going to make sure that I preserve this charcoal for the next time. Okay, so there we really got some good incense going. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more. So here we would have this as the representation of air on the altar if we wanted to. Now we could bring in rattles. We could bring in wind chimes. I should have brought it. I have some gourds that I put out in the sun after, like, probably right before Samhain, and let them dry out, and then they kind of turn into a natural rattle. That's really fun to do. You can decorate them at Samhain. Wind chimes, feathers that you collect, that you find when you're hiking or you're walking, drums, other musical instruments, very good to represent the air element. And then as far as stones go, we might think about stones that are either yellow or blue. So I love citrine and yellow calcite, very good for the air element. Fluorite is also a good one. And I also like blue lace agate or kyanite. So there we get in kind of that light blue, if you get like a light blue kyanite. Now, imagery of angels, dragons, butterflies, birds, fairies, also very good to represent the air element. The athame, or the sword, is the magical tool that's connected to the air element. So you could get an athame if you don't have one. You could purchase one. You could do what I did when I first started out in my late teens. I just had a steak knife that I took from my mom's kitchen and wrapped ribbons around it to make it look a bit fancier. But that can absolutely serve as an athame until you find one. And that can be placed on the altar to represent air for you. As far as incense goes, I've got the dragon's blood going right now, but lavender is a really nice one for the element of air. Anise, lemongrass, cedar, like I mentioned before, and the sticks is really good. Birch and acacia. And this is not an exhaustive list, so these are just a few that are connected to air. So that would be our second idea, setting up an air altar. And if you guys are here live, let me know. Do you guys build elemental altars? Do you have a space on your main altar set aside for the air element? What do you guys use? And I see that Ruth said, "What a pretty kitty." That was Iris. She may walk back through here. And we've got some more people joining us. Colleen is here, and Angel, and Melinda. Hi, everybody. Okay, so let's talk about the third idea for working with air. So consider how you embody the qualities of air. Okay, so let's talk about these qualities and then think about how these are embodied in you, in your own life, maybe in people that you know. So on the positive side, like all of the elements, we have kind of positive qualities that go along with it. We also have some kind of more negative ones. These tend to come out when there's an excess of that element. So on the positive side, when we're pretty balanced, we will feel joyful, youthful, humorous, communicative, very good at getting our thoughts out, intelligent, intuitive, diligent, and just kind of put your mind to something and be able to get it done. So these would be very positive qualities that we're sort of aiming for. So if you see a lot of that in yourself, then I would say that the air element within you is pretty balanced. Now, what will happen is that we all naturally get out of balance for various different reasons. And sometimes it's the entire like elemental system that goes out of balance, like everything we need to kind of work with. And then sometimes it will just be one. And so in this case, how would we know just from kind of observing ourselves that air was out of balance? So if you find yourself gossiping a lot or really interested in gossip, nothing necessarily wrong with it, but gossip can lead to it's kind of distracting sometimes, right? It might distract you from what's important, and it could have negative consequences. It can end up hurting people. So if we notice that we're kind of really into gossip or gossiping a lot, then I would kind of think to myself, okay, maybe I want to work with the air element. It sounds like maybe it's an excess in me. If you're feeling kind of boastful, right? It's always good for us to have pride in what we are and what we do. But if we're very, very boastful to a extreme degree, then we're going to think that the air element might be out of balance. Untruthful, so really not being able to speak, to say what's true, right? And that's not even just about speaking your truth, it's just maybe telling lies to people, exaggerations, feeling more selfish than usual, being fickle, inattentive. So any of these things, like in combination. So if you just feel like one of these things, maybe it's not necessarily the air element that's out of whack. But if you notice a lot of those kind of negative qualities, I would think about working with the air element. Um, so that is our third idea. So kind of observing the qualities in us that are connected to the air element. Okay, so now let's get into like a magical idea here. And I'm going to add a little bit of resin on the top of this. It's still going pretty good, but we're going to put a little bit more on. So working with deities, with animals, spirit animals, with planetary energies, and of course with the elementals connected to the air element. So to work with the deities, some deities, this is not an exhaustive list again, but some deities connected to air are Anubis, Isis, Arian Rod, Zeus. In fact, people have called him the Lord of Air. That is one of his epitaphs. Jupiter, Mercury, Thor, Odin. These are all some ideas. Now, here are a few that you may not have heard of. Those ones are all pretty common from mythology that we may have read, but here's some different ones. So, Nuada is the Celtic god of sky and wind. Enlil is the Sumerian god of air and storms. So there's another idea. Oya, some of you may know Oya. She's a Yoruban goddess associated with wind. And then there is Varuna, which is the Hindu god of the sky. So those are just some ideas. So again, not an exhaustive list. Any god or goddess attached to the sky, to storms, to weather, mountaintops, air, wind. These would all be options that would be good for the element of air. So animal spirits. Okay, so let's say you want to work with some animal spirits that would be connected to air. This one's pretty obvious. Birds, anything that flies in the air, but particularly crows, ravens, very much connected to the air. I think that's why Odin has his connection to the air element. Hawks, falcons, eagles, bats, also connected to air. And in any insect that flies, so in particular butterflies, bees, dragonflies, so working with the spirit animal energy of any of those animals would also be a way to bring in some of the air element. Now you can work with the elemental that's connected to air, which is the sylphs, and I believe that I will be doing an episode at some point on the different elementals, but for now, we'll just say sylphs are the elemental of air, and you can work with those. And an elemental is a pure, and I would go into this more in the future episode, but an elemental is like the pure condensed form of that energy. So if you think about us, we're made of everything. So like everything you see around you is composed of all of the elements in some various degree. So even if we go to like the ocean, and we might think that the ocean is only water, but there's even oxygen, right? There's oxygen there, which is the air element. There's the sand, which is the earth element, and even the fire element is present in the digestion of the various marine animals that are in the water. But when it comes to an elemental is that pure energy. So sometimes they're difficult to work with or difficult to connect to because it's hard for us to understand what one element feels like as opposed to having all of them. But if you really want to experience an element, working with an elemental can be very interesting. And like I said, the one for air is the sylphs. Now, you can also work with planetary energies that are connected to the air element. And for this would be Mercury. That is the planet that's associated with the sign of Gemini, which we know is connected to air. Venus is the planet that is connected to Libra, which is also connected to the element of air. And then we have Uranus, which is connected to Aquarius. So you can work with those planetary energies. You can work on Wednesdays is connected to Mercury and Fridays connected to Venus. There isn't really a day of the week connected to Uranus, but you can work with any of those planetary energies. And you can actually work with them in their god or goddess forms or in their planetary energy forms too. So that is our next idea. I guess that was our fourth idea. So working with animals, spirits, with deities, with elementals, or with planetary energies connected to air. Okay, so let us talk about this next one. I think this next one is a big one. It's a big one for me. I think it's a big one for a lot of people, especially in a community like ours where it's not always easy to speak our truth and maybe we feel like we have to hide some things. So the fifth idea is to reflect on what areas of your life, um, in what areas of your life you're living your truth or you're not living your truth or speaking your truth or not speaking it. So the air element is all about truth. It's about understanding who you are and then transmitting that truth out to the world. And so this is not always easy, and especially not in the way that the collective is today. So those of you who are on the pagan path, which is going to be most of you if you're following me, you may have been on the path for a long time or just a little time, and some of you are more or less out of the broom closet. But there are so many people who have to hide parts of themselves in our community simply because of that spirituality or that religion. So people who have very religious families, perhaps raised in Catholic or Christian households, and your family is not accepting of this religion. So like me, I I have to hide much of this from parts of my family because of that. Now, we may also find other parts of ourselves that we have to hide. So it may not just be about our spirituality. We may hide our emotions. Many people who follow me, I know, are empaths or very sensitive to energy. And many of you have heard people say over and over in your life, "You're too sensitive. You're too this. You're too that. You're too much." Right? And so many of us have been told this over and over, and this leads us to very, very much like hiding, right? Stifling our emotions, stifling who we are. I remember many, many times hiding in the bathroom to cry because it wasn't acceptable to cry. And so this is a way that we're really not speaking our truth, right? We're not living our truth. Now, like I mentioned earlier, some of us have had to hide our religion, our spirituality, but there are other parts of us that we may have to hide: gender identity, sexual orientation, income, right? Sometimes people are embarrassed about how much money they make. They don't make enough, or they make, right? And they feel embarrassed by that. People may have to hide mental illness or neurodivergence, especially if they're in places where it's not acceptable. There's a large stigma still because of this. And and I'll just share a bit. I work with a lot of students who have learning differences. Most of my students have ADHD and dyslexia, a lot of them. And so I talk to them all the time. They have a lot of accommodations in place that we fought hard to get for some of them, and they're embarrassed to use their accommodations. They don't want to ask for their extended time. They don't want to ask for all the things that have been given to them to help even the playing field in school. They're embarrassed because of this stigma attached to it. So there you could just see in so many different places how people can feel they're not able to speak or to live their truth. So any part of you that feels like it's not normal, whatever that means, right, can be a part that's affected here. And so this is part of working with the air element, is learning how we can show ourselves authentically and safely too, right? But and also realizing when it's not going to be safe to do so. So it's not always safe, right, to speak your truth. So I'd love to be able to shout from the rooftops everything about me. It's about my spirituality. I mean, look at um, running a spiritual business and not being able to share it with much of my family. But it's not really safe to do that. So knowing when it's safe and when it's not safe. And in the cases where you find you cannot express your truth or live your truth around certain people, then finding ways to work with the air element to kind of balance that out. So I do a lot of work with the air element to kind of balance the fact that I can't be truthful in all places, or speak my truth in all places. Okay, so that is our, what would they be, our fifth idea. And just saying hi to anybody else who's joining us. I see some people answering the question about what they put on their altar. So Jen said she tries to represent each element on her altar. She said, I never really thought about dedicating to one specifically. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting idea, especially if you decide I'm going to work with this element specifically right now. It's kind of a cool study in the elements is to take one cycle each, like so across 5 cycles, and work with air and then fire, water, earth, and then spirit. So that's kind of an interesting idea. And then I would build that altar for that month or that cycle, and then I change it up the next month. But it's kind of an interesting study of the elements. Debbie said she has photos of a beach where the waves are moving. I figure air creates movement. Absolutely, right. And then she has a feather from a Native American friend. And she said it's on her east wall. Exactly. So having the air altar on the east wall is a very good place. She said, Debbie also asked, can we use other elements to balance another element? Like, would too much air be helped by earth element? Yeah. So that is an important way of working with the elements overall, is knowing how we can bring in certain elements to balance the other ones. So one really good example is, and I use this a lot because a lot of people suffer from depression, but in depression, usually we say that that person has um, maybe an excess of earth and an excess of water, and then they often have they might lack in air. And so what we would do is we would kind of cut the earth and the water and then bring in more of the air element to help balance together. So that's where, like, if you know that you want to work very specifically with one, good idea. But if you want to kind of do overall balance, you can absolutely use the opposites in order to balance them out. Good question. Um, Okay, so the next idea here is about the mind. So having an open mind. Air is adaptable, it's changeable. So really think about this. How good are you at being able to shift and change what you're doing? Change form, change what you're thinking, change how you are. Or are you somebody who kind of gets stuck when things change and it causes a lot of like anxiety and a lot of worries and concerns? So if that's the case for you, it's part of it is constitutional. Some people are more worried and less able to kind of go with it than others. But if you find that you're not really able to shift and change form and kind of change perspective as much as you would like to, working with the air element can help. Um, Learning how to show ourselves authentically. So we kind of talked about that. Hold on a second. Yes, it's learning. We talked about that a bit. How easy is it for you to adopt new ideas when you discover that old ones don't serve you? Or if you have things that you know aren't serving you in your life, they're not productive, how easy is it for you to change? Right? Are you able to change your perspective or see various perspectives, which is also an interesting exercise in the air element? So the air element is all about flexibility in all of its forms. So some of this is the flexibility of the body, but also the flexibility of the mind, our mental flexibility. So if you get stuck in your perspective often, you might consider making a conscious effort to view something through somebody else's eyes. So to quote one of my favorite books that I always would read with the kids, I used to be a reading teacher, and Atticus Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird told Scout, you never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, till you climb into his skin and walk around in it. And so it's very true. We say it, you don't know it till you walk in someone's shoes. It feels cliche because we say it a lot, but there's so much truth to it, right? So it is an interesting exercise to kind of try to see other perspectives, especially if you feel very strongly about something. It doesn't mean that you need to change your mind in any way, but it's an interesting exercise to try to see it through the opposition's eyes. What is it? What's it like to have that other viewpoint? So very, very nice mental exercise to try to bring in the air element. Okay, so another idea is visiting natural locations where the air element is present. So I said climb a mountain, and I mean it and I don't mean it. So I climb mountains, so that's why I say this here. But at least try to get to a higher perspective. So if there's a place where you can go up in a tall building, a skyscraper, right? There are places where you can drive up to the top of a mountain. You can take gondolas in some places up to the top of one. Anytime that we get to a higher elevation, it changes our perspective. I've been playing Zelda Breath of the Wild, and they send you up in these towers. For those who don't know the game, they send you up in these towers, and so that you can map out the location. You can see so much from above that you can't see when you're on the ground, right? So changing our perspective, getting out and getting fresh air. There's a lot of really nice wind up on the top of a mountain, but just any place where there's a lot of wind, letting the wind blow over you. You can even make a spell out of this. So I live in a particular place where it's quite windy at certain times of the year, and just standing there facing the wind and set an intention that as the wind blows towards you and through you and over and across you, right, it just is dissipating all of your negative energy and blowing it away. And if there's something that you want to let go of, send that to the wind as well. You can write it like on bay leaves or something and throw them to the wind, scatter that to the wind. But that can be a nice way to turn that into a spell. There is this place that I go to in Sedona. It is the Amitabha Buddhist stupa, and a stupa, for those who don't know, is like a monument. Some say it's like the living it's like an embodiment of the Buddha there. And people will go and they will pray. You can walk around it clockwise, and as you do so, you kind of send prayers for world peace, for peace among people. But one of the things that one of my guides told me once is she said to sit in front of the stupa, and there's this saying that if a person sits in front of a stupa, when the wind blows over it and through you, it basically gets rid of all of the negative energy that's attached to you. So whenever I go to Sedona, I always sit in front of the stupa for a while. And if there are people there, I tell them about what the guide told me. And then I'll see other people sitting there and letting the negativity blow off over and across them. So those are some ideas. But if you notice it's a windy day, get outside and be in it and just let that cleanse you. The air element is a very purifying and very cleansing element. And so that brings us to the next idea. And this idea it's more along the mundane side of things, but I think that if a person really took this to heart, it would have ramifications in your magical practice. So paying attention to your words and your thoughts. So really think about, most of us don't think about this, right? And sometimes we'll become aware if we're doing shadow work, if we're doing various exercises that make us aware of our thoughts. Then we can see them, but most of the time we don't even observe most of these thoughts. And so there was this study a couple of years ago, and they found that the average person has about 6,000 thoughts every single day. There are some experts who say that that number might be 10 times that much. It could be like 60,000 to 80,000 thoughts. But the really disturbing part of the study for me was that 80% of the participants, so 80% of the thoughts that people were having were negative, and 95% of them were repetitive, which means that like if 80% of them are negative and then 95% are repetitive, it's like we're basically have this track going of repetitive negative thoughts. And many of the thoughts are also irrelevant. They're irrelevant to like anything that's going on. And so obviously this is a problem, right? And our minds have so much more potential than what we are using them for. So what could we do? So, you can do things like working with the air element. Number one, that's what we're even talking about this tonight. Working with the air element will immediately help you with your thoughts. People who spend time working with the air element find that their negative thoughts start to dissipate. Maybe not all of them, but they're going to notice that they're not as bothered by them and they're not as frequent. But the other thing we can do is be careful about the mental things that we consume. So thoughts and the stuff around us, we consume more than just water and food. We consume ideas, we consume people's energy, we consume art, right? And so especially if you're somebody who is an empath or you're very sensitive, you really want to be careful about the kind of energy that you consume. You want to watch the people that you're around, their mental state. Are they more positive or are they mostly negative? And so you want to really think about that. So that is just a kind of a food for thought, is to observe your thoughts. What are they like? And if you notice that there's a lot of negative ones, an easy trick is to kind of think about that wind, that idea of blowing the negative energy. So just imagine kind of that thought blowing out. You sort of acknowledge the thought. Okay, that's a negative thought, and then I'm going to just acknowledge it. It was there, and then I'm going to let it dissipate. The other thing you can do too is if you notice there's specific thoughts that happen over and over and they're very negative, you can attempt to negate them. Very simple. It's just you change the wording. Sometimes it's just one word. So if I have a thought that says like I'll never have enough, I'm always struggling or something like that, I can change that to I have enough. I have enough of what I need. And you don't have to believe it, and it doesn't even have to be true, but over time we have the ability to manifest a state, right? Our state helps us manifest things. So there's a lot of things we can do to control our thoughts, and so it's worth it if you feel like, especially if you're negative, if you're anxious, good idea to see what's going on with your thoughts and your thinking. And then I think one of the biggest ways, this is why I saved this one sort of for the end, is one of the biggest ways to work with the air element is creating a daily or almost daily breathwork practice. So prana is the Sanskrit word for breath, but it's so much more. In the West, we think of like breath as just what we breathe in and we breathe out as one thing that we need, right? But prana is like the truly translates to life force. So literally the breath is your life force. So in some traditions we might call this pneuma, other traditions might call it the odic force, chi, life force, vital energy. This is the energy that permeates all things. This is the energy that living things in particular have. We take prana in through food, and water, and we also take it in through the air we breathe. So everything we consume, we're taking in this prana. Now, our prana lives in our pranamaya kosha. That is the breath body or the energy body. So we're not just a physical being, we also have a energy body. And this is where most of us experience some blockages of energy. Many of us don't even realize how many blockages we have. Now, breath work moves that pranic energy, which is why it's the fastest way to break up energy blockages. So if you are somebody who says, I keep like kind of repeating patterns like this, it seems like I'm carrying negative energy, there's always negative things happening, you feel like you're in kind of a cycle like that, if you're not doing breath work regularly, I would really consider adding that in. And I'm going to give a couple suggestions here. So there are many added benefits to this. Like I said, it's going to break through energetic blockages in the energetic body, which will make a person feel better physically. Usually, it's going to make them feel better emotionally and mentally. It calms the mind, and people who practice breath work regularly find that they have more control over their emotions. So very good, right? For empaths, people who are pretty sensitive, better to be able to control those when we want to. It also strengthens our self-belief. So if you're somebody who has some self-doubt or maybe a lot of self-doubt, breath work can very much help with this. So when you regularly practice your breath, you become really good at moving energy. And this also has benefits for those of us who practice magic, because we can harness this amplified energy during our spell work and our magical practices. Okay, so I want to share with you, kind of end here, we're just going to share with you a couple of breaths, and then we'll move to the Q&A. So there are three types of breath that we typically can put breath into three different categories. And what I recommend people do is try to do one of these three in a little practice on most days that they can. Now, some days you're not going to be able to do much. All you really need is 5 minutes for this. So the first type of breath is the activating breath or the heating breath. So an example of this would be the breath of fire. Heating breath is going to move lots of energy through the body. So if you're feeling like you've got stuck energy, like if I felt like I have like kind of tension in my body somewhere, or you maybe you sense it in your aura, you just sense it around you, I've got kind of carrying negative energy, this is a very good breath to break that up and get that energy moving. Breath of fire, I show it all the time because it's just one of the best breaths. You can start, if you've never done it before, just act like you're going to fog up a mirror. And then from there, you're just going to close your mouth. And it's that same action. So like right when I'm trying to fog up that mirror, put your hand on your belly, and you're going to feel this kind of staccato movement with the belly. And then you're going to close the mouth. So it's just. And this can, you can do that faster than I was doing it. You can do it slower, especially if you're first starting out. I recommend people do it for about a minute. It can have profound effects on moving your energy. If you're tired, if you're sleepy, if you need a pep up, that is a great breath to try. Now, the opposite end of the spectrum is the cooling breath. The cooling breath will bring the system down. So if somebody's really anxious, if they have like a lot of hot emotions like anger, then they can bring the energy system down through a cooling breath like Satali pranayam. Satali pranayam is called the curled tongue breath. So if you're somebody who can curl your tongue, what you would do is you curl your tongue, you kind of slightly stick it out of your mouth, and then you're just going to breathe in through the curled tongue, and then you just close your mouth and breathe out through the nose. Now, if you can't curl your tongue like me, then you'll just sit like, we're going to pretend like you're sipping in through a straw. So some people call this the sipping breath. So it's just, and then you close the mouth, and then you exhale through the nose. And you do that for a minute or two, and that can be very deactivating for the system. And then there is the neutralizing breath, which is a breath that sort of evens out the system. So if you just want to come to kind of a neutral spot, we're not really trying to relax or pep ourselves up, we can try the neutralizing breath. A good one would be the healing square breath. It's an even sided breath. So we inhale for a count of 4, we hold for a count of 4, exhale for a count of 4, and then hold for a count of 4. And that makes the 4 sides of the square. And you can experiment with that number. 4 is a starting number, but you can do 3 if 4 is too long of a hold. You can do 5 or 6 if it's not enough. So I recommend people try to incorporate all 3 of those breaths in a practice. And literally, if you did like a minute or 2 of each of those, it's a 5-minute practice. So, and I promise you, it is one of the, if not the fastest way to accelerate like kind of your spiritual energy, and it will break through all these blockages that you have. Okay, so I am going to shift over into the Q&A now. I have a couple of questions that I saw earlier. I rushed here back from the dentist and I got here much later than I thought I would. So if I have missed questions that people left for me, I will go back later tonight and I'll answer them, or I'm going to add them to next week. But I do have a few I wrote down before I left. And then anybody who's live, put questions in the chat, and I'm going to answer those as well. Okay, it doesn't have to be about the air element, anything connected to witchcraft, shadow work, energy work, anything that you want to know. Okay, so let's start first with Tom's question. He had a great question, and it's actually, I think it's a really good question for what we're talking about tonight, because he's talking about breaking up negative energy. And so one way we can do that is through the breath. Okay, so Tom said, how do I weave negative energy into a productive purpose? He said, I have felt a surplus of it in me, and it's like I need to do something with it or it corrupts my mood. And so this is very common. We have too much negative energy in the body. We're going to feel down. It's going to bring the mood down. It's going to bring our energy down. We might get body aches and pains. So, right, all these systems are all connected. So, very good to address this question, figure out how we can find positive ways to work with this energy. So the first thing I would say is I'm going to kind of start with this because we literally just talked about breath, is finding ways to burn off the negative energy. And the first way would be through the breath. So activating breath work like the dragon's breath or the breath of fire. So that's the quick staccato inhale and with a passive exhale. So it's just, and the stomach is pumping as I'm breathing. So that can be a very activating breath for people. So sometimes when people are like, I feel like a lot of negative energy kind of attached to me, try that breath a couple minutes, and that will often shake that energy up and get that moving out of the system. Because what happens when he says, and other people, I'm sure you relate, when he says I've got like this surplus of the negative energy, it feels like it's it's around me, it's corrupting me, right? What's happened is that negative energy is found its a hold in your energetic body. And so one of the simplest ways to get rid of it is move it through the energetic body, burn it off. Now, another great thing to try is the lion's breath. I cannot tell you, and those of you who've tried it, who've come to some of my rituals and where we've done it, know this breath is so very good for getting rid of negative energy. Looks crazy. We just get over ourselves. I get over myself on the camera to demonstrate it. But you're going to inhale deeply. And then on the exhale, you stick out your tongue and you're going to make like a hissing sound. People you can make a crazy face, bug out your eyes. Sometimes people do, but you're really trying to get this energy out. So when people have a lot of anger, a lot of like negative energy, and you're just like when you're feeling like that, this is the breath to try. So it's like, and you just can do that as many times as you want and just get it all out. And it has helped me so much when I'm especially when I was going through last year. I was quitting my job and I was having so many problems with the person that I had worked for was threatening to sue me, and I was always carrying all this negative energy, and I would do that breath every night, and it got me through that period of time. So try that. Very good. Other things would be like Kundalini energy exercises. So, like if somebody, a lot of people are going to carry negative energy in the shoulders and in the midsection. So, you can inhale and scrunch your shoulders up, and on the exhale, drop them down. And you do that for a minute or two, and that can get rid of some excess energy. Another one is like the spinal twist I've shown before. So you put your fingertips on the shoulders, inhale as you look to the left, and then you exhale as you look to the right, and you just kind of make that into a repetitive movement, which is what a kriya is. And then you do that for a minute or two, and that can break up some of that stuck, stagnant energy. So that would be the way I would kind of get rid of negative energy from an energetic perspective. Now, other things you want to think about is supplementing into a positive activity. So martial arts, kickboxing. There was a time when I had a friend who was teaching me some martial arts, teaching me how to break boards. Very good for getting out a negative energy, right? I like to hike. Like I've told you earlier, I climb mountains. And because that's such a strenuous activity, it can get like a lot of those negative energy and emotions out. So when I'm having problems that I just, they're just building up, building up, building up, I'm going to go take a hike. And it usually helps. But running, anything that gets us moving and gets that energy out, power yoga, stuff that's going to burn that energy off. But you can also sublimate into art, music, if you're somebody who draws, paints, sings, plays an instrument. All of these are positive ways, because you just need to, what's happening when you're having that negative energy, like I said, it's just stuck to you. Do something and it's going to move it. And then, another thought too is put that energy towards like a social justice cause that is important to you. So I became very angry about the way that animals were treated. And so I put that energy into working with animal rights organizations for a period of time. So that is also a way. So think about a social justice cause that means a lot to you and put that energy there. But shadow work can also help. So when a person's ready to dive into the emotions, like this, all the things I've talked about will help burn off the energy. But when a person's ready to dive into them, shadow work can very much help. And what people find as they do more and more shadow work is that they're less affected by the negative energy. So I hope that helps. And I've got one other question here, and then I'm going to go to the chat. And anybody who's got any more questions, put them in. Kelly, she asked, do you think that shadow work journals are helpful? And so I do think that shadow work journals are helpful. I think it depends on the person. Not everyone is wild about journaling. I will confess I'm not really a big journaler. And I do a lot of writing, and so I think for work, and so I think that for me, more writing is just more writing, right? So I prefer to think through prompts and things. So the beauty of like the shadow work journals is they're going to come loaded with a bunch of prompts that you can then work through, and you pick prompts that resonate with you, and you start to journal your thoughts on them. You can also do what I do, where I'll go out hiking or walking like at dusk, which is a nice time of the day for shadow work, and I will contemplate the prompt in my mind. And then maybe perhaps I would have notebook paper with me to write down a few thoughts, but I like doing it that way. So I think that the journals are very good for those who like journaling, but if you're somebody who doesn't like journaling, you don't have to feel that like it's the only way to do shadow work. And also, by the way, so there are a lot of journals on the market. I've noticed more and more coming out all the time. But you also can Google shadow work prompts, and there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of prompts. And people ask me a lot, like, how do I know if a prompt is good? It's good if it's a question you want to answer. So there's really no right or wrong to this, but you could go online, Google shadow work prompts, pull yourself off 25 of them, and you pretty much got a shadow work journal you just made for yourself. But sometimes people like to have it bound and have something to work through, and I absolutely think there's so much value in that as well. So yes, I do think that they can be helpful aids in our shadow work. Good question. All right, let's see. Anybody else? Let's see if we got some questions or anything in the chat. Let's see here. Cindy said, my father and brother are both ministers. I love them both very much. I do not necessarily agree with the way I was raised. I love my family. I've always been drawn to the supernatural. There's more than heaven and hell. Yeah, I agree. She said, I believe I have a horned God speaking to me. My family loves me. They have a hard time understanding me. Yeah. So my family loves me as well. They're good people. They're loving people, but they don't understand the stuff we're doing. And some people are not able to shift their perspective enough to see that um, maybe there are alternatives to spirituality and religion. So they get very fixated on their way of thinking. It's hard to shift that and be able to see other people's. So I agree. Our families can be very good families and still not get on board with all this, and many of us will have to hide because of that. Um, Okay. Let's see here. It kept jumping on me. Debbie says your mind is always listening. Yep, it's always going, right? Caleb said he always tries to monitor his thoughts and redirect any negative ones into positive ones. Yeah, so that can be a very good strategy for many people. Some people it doesn't work as well, but taking the negative thought, kind of redirecting it into a positive thought. I also recommend people look at what's underneath them. If there's repetitive ones, sometimes just shifting them into the positive means we leave stuff underneath the surface that we haven't worked on. But as long as we're kind of aware of that too, when they become more repetitive, kind of seeing where could that be coming from. But I love that strategy of shifting the thoughts. Jen said, what chakra affects the gallbladder? Okay, so I would say probably root and sacral is what I would say. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to look this up later in one of my textbooks and see if there are any other ones. But I would say root and sacral. Good question. Because, yeah, working with the chakras in addition to any physical treatments that people have for ailments is a good idea. Caleb said, I believe it was you that told me about bees' breath, and I feel like discussing that may benefit someone. Good. You know what? I'm glad you brought that up because, you know, it was on my mind to put it in this episode too. So, bees' breath is a very good breath. It's great for anxiety, and and because we're talking about the air element and bees are connected to the air element, great breath. Okay, so the bees breath is called Brahmari breath in Sanskrit. Brahmari is the deity of bees in the Hindu pantheon. And the bees breath is very simple. So what you do is you're going to take your index fingers, it doesn't matter which fingers, but you're going to close off your ears, and you don't have to shut them really tight, but just kind of close them off so that your voice goes kind of internally in the head. And then you want to close your eyes, take an inhale just like normal, and then on the exhale, you're going to exhale, but you're going to make a humming sound with your ears closed. And so that humming sound will reverberate in the head. And when people do that, it's very good for anxiety, but it's also very good for the throat chakra. So if somebody needed to speak their truth about something, or let's say you have a difficult conversation that's coming up, trying this breath can be very good. If you have, just working with the throat chakra in general, but like somebody has to do like some public speaking and they're feeling really nervous about it. I tell a lot of my students to try this breath before they have to give speeches in class. So you would just inhale here. And you just extend the humming out until it sort of tapers off, and then you take another inhale and you do it again. You do a couple rounds of that, and it's amazing for bringing down anxiety. Good, great for activating the throat chakra, and great for working with the air element. So thanks, Caleb, for bringing that up because I did want to talk about that tonight. Kurt asked, have you ever used the spirit flame? I'm not sure what you mean. Do you mean like the spirit element? Put in the chat, just elaborate on that because I'm not quite sure what you mean. And then Kurt did say he doesn't like to journal either. Yeah, for people who don't, they sometimes think they have to do the journaling, but you can find other ways. Like I said, contemplation is a good way. Jen has been suffering since Sunday with gallbladder stuff. Okay, and she's over it. Yeah, I'll look up some more stuff for you, but I would think about the root and the sacral as possibly being out of balance. Anybody else put questions, comments in the chat? And I'm gonna while we wait to see if there's anything more people want to say. I don't know if I'll tell you what's coming up, and I don't know if she's here. I don't think Carla Anaya Celine is here, but she sent me this card. You probably will not be able to see it on there, but I'm bringing this up because it says Mercury retrograde. It says, sorry, I missed your birthday. Mercury was in retrograde. Well, she didn't miss my birthday because she was at my birthday show, but it's a very cute card. Thank you, Carla. I love getting mail from people. So thank you. And I love the little card with the cat, and it's Mercury retrograde, so perfect, right? Okay, so what is coming up on next week, 4/24? I am going to do a special episode on self-belief in magic. So this was supposed to be part of last week's episode on the fire element, and I thought, why cram that into like couple minutes? Let's make a whole episode out of it, because this is one of the biggest blockages that people have, whether they know it or not. Many people suffer from issues of self-belief in both magical and mundane lives. So we're going to talk all about how we can transform self-doubt into self-belief, and how it impacts our magic, what will happen when we actually work through that stuff. So that's going to be a great episode coming up next week. And then the following week on 5/1, it's Beltane. So we're going to do an episode on Beltane. And then on 5/4, Saturday 5/4, I believe is the date, we're going to be doing our Beltane ritual. Those who are in our Shadow Seekers membership or are part of the Coven of Midnight's Flame, you guys are all coming with free tickets to that. But those who are not part of those groups will be able to get a ticket through donation if they would like to come to that ritual. We're going to be working with Kate. This is a similar ritual to what we did last Beltane, back by popular demand. People loved this ritual, and we are going to work with Kate. We're going to travel with her to her sacred grove, and we are going to get to visit with various parts of ourself, including future versions of us, past versions, the inner child, the higher self. So really Very cool ritual. So I hope you guys will come to that. That is on, I believe it's going to be Saturday 5/4. And then the following Wednesday 5/8, I think I'm just going to do the episode on the spirit element and then just kind of close up the elements, the episodes on the elements, and then move on to some other topics. And that reminds me, if anybody has any ideas for future episodes, let me know. You can always put them in the chat or message me with them. I'm always looking for new ideas for future episodes. Okay. Anything here in the chat? Okay. Kurt said, no, it is in the Strega path. You put in a flammable substance in a cauldron and light it to represent spirit. Oh, that's really cool. Yeah. No, I haven't done that. Is there like a particular flammable substance you use? Or can it be anything? That's really interesting. And then Sonia said, if I'm wanting to work more with more noticeable, intense energy work craft, do you have any warding tips? Okay. Yeah, so if you are going to kind of up level some of that work you're doing, you're going to be working with some more intense energy, you definitely want to do something to kind of protect yourself. Simple aura cleansing is good, and shielding is good. So if you have a shielding technique that you already use, then you can use that. If you don't have one that you like, I recommend take so basically thinking about your aura. And so what happens to a lot of people is when they want to protect themselves, they think about like drawing inward. And so what we do is unconsciously we draw the aura inside of us, and we make ourselves smaller, and that's not really the best idea. So you kind of think about like an animal who gets startled, or there's like a fear element to it, right? The cats will like bristle up, their tails puff up, dogs will kind of like get bigger looking. They're all trying to get bigger looking. So we want to make our aura, our energy field bigger than smaller usually. And so what you can do is, since the natural inclination is kind of pull the aura inward, think about consciously pushing it outward. And you can think about like an arm's width, right, on any side, like above, below, and to the sides of you, and really think about pushing your aura, like intentionally pushing your aura outwards and creating this space that nothing will come in other than what you invite into that space. So that can be good. And then after doing the workings, I would do aura cleansing, where you just kind of visualize or go into your mind's eye and kind of think about your aura. Some people won't really notice darkness in the aura, and it's okay. But if you do notice there's kind of like dark spots in the aura, then you can think about blowing them away or brushing them off. But even if you can't notice that, just think about like just brushing your whole aura, just like we would brush like our body off, like our physical body off. Think about doing that to your aura. And if you notice any cords kind of attached to you after these kind of workings, just imagine like taking like think about a selenite athame and just cutting those and freeing myself from them, kind of sending them back to wherever they came. Another idea that I was thinking too, though, is that if you cast a circle, and if you're going to call the quarters, like when you're doing work with energy like that, you might want to do the extra layers of that. You might consider working with the elemental guardians rather than just the elements. So like a lot of times, like when I'm just going to do a circle here for Covenant Midnight's Flame or Shadow Seekers, I just call like the element of air, the element of earth. But if you want even more protection, you can work with the elemental guardians, and that's just like a higher level of protection. But hopefully some of those ideas will work for you. But definitely good idea to have some kind of a way to kind of ward off negative energy. But a lot of it can be done just through the mental space. And Kurt said isopropyl alcohol for that flame. And now that you're saying that, I have done that. I remember there was a ritual where we put isopropyl alcohol in the cauldron, and I want to say like some food coloring too, and it was making different colored flames. I'm not sure how safe that was, but we have done that. But very cool idea, very dramatic, and so beautiful in a ritual. All right. Well, I do not see anything else here, so I am going to sign off. But if I missed anybody's questions, I'll go back and answer those later. If you like what you hear, leave a heart or a thumbs up somewhere, just so we can get this into the feed of more people. And if you're watching this back later on YouTube, or if you don't know about our YouTube, go to YouTube. Our YouTube is Body Mind Witchcraft, and if you subscribe to that, then you will make sure to not miss any future episodes. All right. Until next time, blessed be.